It's the eve of the return of golf for the PGA Tour champions. Tomorrow morning, the Ally Challenge tees off in its third year, and it's a big one for a trio of golfers making their Champions Tour debut. That includes a former Buick Open winner, Jim Furyk. He added his name to the plaque in the Champions Circle in 2003, and he couldn't be happier. This is his first event on the Senior Tour. Furyk has had plenty of success at Warwick Hills. Along with his win, he has 8 top 10 finishes in 15 starts. And despite turning 50, Furyk says he can attack the course the exact same way as back in the day.
Honestly, I hit the ball about the same distance as I did. And last time we were here was 09. I probably hit the ball the same exact distance I did then because of equipment. I'm probably not creating the same speed physically, but the golf ball, the equipment goes farther. I fly the ball about the same distance. So,
welcome to this episode of the Media's Input. I am your host, James A. Paxton. To check out this interview and previous interviews of mine, go to my YouTube channel, James Paxton. Episode 24 had Flint Firebirds play-by-play broadcaster on the TV and radio, Mr. Dominic Hay. Today, we have from ABC 12, Mr. Jason Lewis. How are we doing, sir?
Good. That's a tough person to follow, Dominic. He's a pretty good guess you got there.
Yeah, I mean, he was a cool guy. Talked a lot of hockey. It's one of those times where I try to get all around people. Radio DJs, photographers, news reporters, sports guys. But with hockey and basketball coming back in the next 2 weeks, there's going to be a lot of sports people. And I know you're a hockey guy, and we're going to talk hockey later in the interview. And Wednesday, I have a guy who's really good with basketball. So sports are coming back, and I'm here with a passion. That's for sure.
It's definitely an exciting time, no doubt. I mean, it's crazy to think that we hadn't had sports for so long, and it's like you need it now, and it's finally here.
Yeah, it's. I think we do need it. Do we need sports to live every day? I mean, no, but I think you need the general escape in life of sports and movies and music. When that kind of stuff isn't going on, it just doesn't feel like you can escape from the real world, and it's hard to escape from the real world of the coronavirus, I'd say.
No, absolutely. And you kind of nailed that on the head right there. It just gives you that sense of normalcy and that escape to just get away for whether it's 2-3 hours, watch a game and just enjoy. Unfortunately, you can't do it in person right now, but at least you could turn on the TV and see something.
Yeah, that's for sure. And, I don't know what's going to happen in months to come, but I hope that athletes realize that a lot of people are watching and they have fans even though they're not there. I understand it's probably very different, but they're still passionate fans, even though they're not there.
Absolutely. And I mean, this past weekend, like with the Ally Challenge, for instance, we were out there on the golf course all week. And like on the 17th hole, it's known as that crazy rowdy hole that, everybody's allowed to cheer. They have a good time. They interact with the golfers. And they did something pretty cool. They had this big screen behind the green. And when the golfers were coming up 17, fans were able to send in videos. And you heard the cheering. You heard them loud. You saw their faces going crazy. And a lot of the golfers interacted with that screen. So it kind of gave like that feeling as if fans were there. And they got to get involved and have some fun with it. But obviously they weren't. It was kind of cool, though, yesterday for the final round, coming down 18-3, and I think it was 15 or 16. I can't remember which hole. All those holes that line the golf course have houses. So there was, like, some houses that had, like, brought in bleachers and tents and stuff like that. So, like, all along the golf course there were fans watching. So it was kind of like they were there. Just they couldn't step foot on the golf course. So other parts of the golf course were pretty dead. But you could hear them from like 3-4 holes away because they were getting hyped for the little bit that they could actually see.
What was different for you being a TV reporter, reporting on something like the Ally Challenge during a pandemic?
I mean, it was definitely a cool feeling in a way because like nobody could be there and you kind of felt cool that you actually could be there and like watch it in person. But just even when it came to like getting on the golf course, you had to obviously get the temperature checks, get screened, you had to answer a bunch of questions. Anytime that you were indoors, you had to wear a mask. Anytime that we were in settings where there was people within basically 10 feet of you had to wear masks. When I was shooting like out on like the 13th hole, like those farthest holes and stuff away from the clubhouse, I was basically the only one out there. So I didn't have to wear a mask in that setting, but it was just definitely weird as you're walking around the golf course. There's no fans. There were not even any ropes out there. So it was like you were just going out there to, play golf by yourself, and then these pros are coming up. So that was really cool, and it was just different and interesting. I think the weirdest part about the golf course was the fact that there was no grandstands or anything. So, because they obviously don't need them. So, like, when I've covered these events in the past, you're like have to go different routes to avoid the grandstands, avoid the fan zones, the bathrooms, the concessions. Like you have to kind of weave your way through everything because the golf course is covered with stuff. But this week it was just basically like a few backstops on holes, and the backstops were really just there to hide the crane that had the camera up high. But that was like it. There was like nothing out there. It was just a weird, interesting feeling, to say the least.
Yeah, I'm guessing it has a little bit of eeriness to it, knowing that you're playing sports and you're covering this tournament with everything going on in the world.
Absolutely. And, even talking to the golfers and stuff like that, like obviously they love the fans. That gets them amped up. And a lot of them were saying this week, we have to find other ways to, amp up that intensity, get that adrenaline rush, because when you have like hundreds of people surrounding you and you have this birdie putt coming up, you feel the adrenaline, you feel the rush of the fans being there. And like to not have that, they were like, oh, it's just like, you're going out to play like a betting game with your buddies. And it just nothing replicates the fans and that atmosphere of everybody there getting hype and stuff like that. And they said it was definitely an adjustment and something that they had to find that extra juice to get them fired up.
Well, I'm guessing it's more casual. Even you out there, you realize like, yeah, this is a tournament, but it's a little bit more casual than usual.
Yeah, I mean, the golfers were getting pissed if they were missing putts and stuff that they should have been making. But you could see them. I would say this was the third year that the Ally Challenge has been here, and I've never seen the golfers interacting with each other like they were in this. Now, granted, you might not have heard it because there was always fans out there and there was commotion, but just even the things like, Ernie Els hit a hole-in-one. I forget who the other person was that hit a hole-in-one. And his group was like clapping and cheering for him. We're like, if you're in a competition and there are fans around, they're cheering. I feel like you don't really see the other golfers be like, hey, nice job. And like, they were like clapping and getting into it and bumping elbows and stuff like that. Like, I feel like in competition settings, you don't usually see that. So it was kind of cool to see how the golfers rallied around each other and amped each other up in their groups. But yeah, like I said, when they were missing putts that they should have been making, you could see them pissed, and some of them would walk off the green before the other dudes even finished the hole. So you kind of got both ends of the spectrum.
Talk to me about your educational and professional history. When did you decide this is what I'm going to do and this is my passion and I got to make this my career? And how did you get to ABC 12?
So for me, I was one of the ones that kind of knew super, super early. I'd say I was lucky in that aspect. It was probably like 7th or 8th grade that I knew that like professional sports wasn't in my future. So, you fall back and like, okay, so what do I want to do? I want to be involved in sports. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, and one of our family friends, his name is Bruce Beck. And Bruce Beck is the sports director at NBC in New York City. And, he got his start in New York City. He's worked in New York City his entire career, and I've been around him since I was young. So he had a sports broadcasting camp, and I did it for 3 summers, but I think I did it 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is when I did it. It's like a week and a half long. It's with Bruce Beck and Ian Eagle, and I'm sure you heard the Ian Eagle name. He does the play-by-play for the NFL and does March Madness stuff.
Yeah, he's a CBS, right?
Right, he works for CBS, exactly. He's an extremely talented, awesome guy. But Bruce, I think it was before the first year I went to the camp, so it might have been 5th grade or 6th grade. My parents set up a lunch with him, and sat down, talked to him, and he just kind of told me a little bit about what he does and what this business is like. And like, yeah, it's awesome. You get to like go get games, you get to watch sports and have a good time, but there's a lot of hard work and stuff. And after that conversation with him, I kind of was like, okay, this is cool. This is what I would love to do this. I want to be you. And he kind of mentored me along the way. So when I was applying to colleges, like at that point, and after doing his camp, those 3 summers, like I was like, all right, full go. This is what I want to do. I'm going to make sure that this happens. And so I went to Arizona State, definitely one of the best journalism schools in the country, no doubt. When I was in school, it was the only school in the nation that went live 5 days a week for student broadcast. So we were actually live on air on PBS. So that was a really cool experience, and that really kind of jump-started you. I had a bunch of internships and whatnot out there with the local stations. I was on air at a station in Phoenix. I think it was my junior year. So I got lucky that I got to do that. And, those internships really set me up along with that being live on air at such a young age to get me to where I am today. In the professional world, I got lucky that my first job was in New York City. I was a freelance photographer is what I started, and after a month, I was already on air. So like that was cool. And my first day of work at that station, they're like, so growing up there, I was a huge Yankees fan. I am a huge Yankees fan. First day of work, they're like, all right, we're going to Yankee Stadium. Sweet, like this is awesome. And it was the day that Jeter hit 3,000.
Oh wow.
So that was my first day in like the professional world. So that's like, does it get any higher and better than that? Like your childhood team, one of your favorite players growing up and seeing him hit 3,000 on your first day of work. And then from there, I was freelance there. Worked there for like almost 3 years. Then went to a little small town in Texas and did like the normal journalism route of going to the small towns. I was in a town called Abilene, Texas. I was there for about a year and a half. And then from there, I went to upstate New York. So came back closer to home in Albany. Lived in Saratoga Springs, which is an awesome little town. They have the horse racing track. The horse racing is amazing. It's so much fun to cover. I actually got to see American Pharoah lose his first race after winning the Triple Crown there. So that was pretty cool. It was in the Travers Stakes, and that race is older than any of the Triple Crown races. And they call it the Midsummer Derby, and they call that place the Graveyard of Champions because numerous Triple Crown winners have lost there after winning the Triple Crown. So that was cool. And then from there, I headed up to Michigan, and that's where you got me now.
Did you try to change anything about how you report or how you appear on TV or broadcast from in the beginning of your career to now?
I mean, I can tell you if I looked at my stuff right now, I would probably laugh and be embarrassed that people actually put that on TV. But it's like anything, the more you do it, the more you learn and grow. I definitely would say I've changed my style. I've had mentors and people that have helped me along the way that have, taught me like little things. And, everybody that I've worked with, I've tried to take a little something from them, and then you kind of find your own style. But I wouldn't say there's one specific thing and I was like, oh yeah, this is definitely what I changed. But there's definitely a lot that's different from day one in the professional world to now, for sure.
What would you say to someone who wants to be like you, who's 18 years old? What would you say is the most important thing they need to do?
Obviously, like internships are the most important thing. I think you're going to get so much more out of internships than you ever will get out of the in-classroom setting, because until you're actually, in the newsroom, that whole feeling and that whole setting is completely different. Like, not taking anything away from class. Like, you could learn a lot from class. You learn the basics, but until you're in a newsroom, you don't really see it all. And the biggest thing I would encourage is to do internships and whatnot, because that's going to help get you to the point. Plus, you're going to be able to network and get the connections, and those people are going to help. This business is so much about connections, and who you meet and who you know. Obviously, you could be really good at what you do, but if you're even with somebody else and they know somebody there or they have a connection, that's going to give them an upper hand. So internships is definitely number one. And the biggest thing too is just keep your head up, because especially in a day like now with 2020, it's hard to get a job, and this business is a super competitive business. I think before I got my first job, I probably applied to like 125 jobs before I got a call back from like 2 of them. So the biggest thing is just keep chugging away, keep pushing, and keep your head up, and don't get discouraged. If this is something you really want to do, keep working at it and keep trying. Right when I graduated college, before I got that job in New York, I bartended for like a month before I got a job. So I started applying before I left Arizona State, moved home because I had nothing, started bartending, and then within a month got that job. So I got lucky that I got it pretty early, but just keep pushing away and keep busting your butt, and something will come along and it'll be the right opportunity.
Well, you've already mentioned 2 stories with Derek Jeter and the Saratoga story, but what are some other really cool stories that you've had a pleasure of reporting on?
I mean, there's been a bunch. I mean, I try to make it where, telling anybody could read highlights. So you want to be able to tell those stories, and that's more of what this is about than just reading highlights. I would say when I was in Texas, I did this story about this guy who basically adopted a group of football players in a way. All right, let me take it back. Let's start over. So he was a baseball coach, and he got diagnosed with he had to go under kidney dialysis and everything like that because he had kidney disease, and he basically was at the lowest of lows, and he had no motivation to get up every morning, no motivation to do anything. And somebody asked him if he wanted to coach that baseball team, just help out, just be around the kids. And he's like, okay. And that gave him the love for life again. And there was a bunch of kids on that team, and it wasn't the greatest area that he was in. And he, in a way, like, not adopted, but took those kids under his wing. And he said his goal was to have them graduate high school, and he would take them out of town weekends that people were doing parties. He basically became a father figure of those kids. And his goal was for them to graduate high school, get that degree, and go to college. And I met him those kids' senior year. And I did the story on him, everything he had gone through to that point, and then seeing them off to graduation and stuff like that. And it was really kind of cool. And just the way that the kids talked to him. I remember one of them, and this really hit me. He's like, I could tell you right now, I wouldn't still be in school if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for him. And that was one of my favorites. Hockey-wise, I know you'll like this one. With the Flint Firebirds, I actually did a story this past year on Coach Eric Wellwood and what he went through in his career. For those that don't know, he got skated and his career ended. He was minutes away from bleeding out and almost died basically in the ambulance if the medics and stuff didn't get him there. And that was a really cool story to do. Coach Wellwood was awesome, open book and everything like that. And that was really cool. And now look at him. He's one of the youngest coaches in the OHL, turned a team around that won barely any games the year before to now, a contender. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it through the season, but they've definitely got a good future with Welly behind the bench for them.
Yeah, it's you brought up two really good stories. I'm glad that you brought up, because it's not just I love watching hockey for the goals. I love watching basketball for the dunks, football, baseball. I'm a huge fan of all the four major sports. They bring life out of situations, and sports is much more than just, oh my God, did you see that play? Like I fell in love with sports and this passion of sports, and I played baseball until I was in high school, and no, I wasn't going to be Ian Kinsler, even though I was at second base. But you find other ways to either work in sports or for it to save your life or get you emotional. And not a lot of people realize that that's what sports does for people.
Absolutely. And honestly, like, that's the main reason I'm in this business and like enjoy being in this business, is telling those stories and sharing other people's passion for sports like I have. Like we were saying, the highlights are one thing, like that's cool and all, but even, when my teams aren't in it in the playoffs, I know we're going to talk hockey in a little bit, and I'm sure you're going to ask me, who I think is going to win. But for me, like, if my team's not in it, the biggest thing for me is just, I want the team with the best story to win, because that makes it more exciting. You want to get behind a team for what they stand for, what they believe in, or if their comeback story, that Cinderella story, like, people grab onto that and gravitate towards that because it's a good story. And that's what I push for in the playoffs and when it comes to championships, if I don't have a horse in that race, for sure.
So I know for your job at ABC 12, high school sports are a really big part of it. What do you think that's going to look like in the fall, if we do have any? How do you think you'll be doing your job? Have you talked to any coaches or players about what they're anticipating?
All the coaches that I talk to are in that optimistic mode right now. They're hopeful, but they know realistically, who knows what could happen. 2020, everything's been crazy. So you never know. Obviously I want sports to happen, and I want to see football season and everything like that. But when you look at like the MLB, for instance, they couldn't even make it 3 days without having an outbreak. And they, in that, what was it, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I don't know. With the golf, my whole brain is all fried. But, 30 postponements in that first full week of baseball. Like, when you look at that, if a professional team can't do it, it's hard to see how football in high school is going to happen, because they're not socially distant. Like, look at baseball. These dudes are supposedly in a bubble, spread out throughout a giant field, and they can't even do it. So, like, we're hopeful, but you never know. And then when it comes to coverage-wise, luckily the media is allowed to be at games before our fans are. So there's a good chance we'll be able to be there on the sidelines. But the biggest thing is going to be just, we're obviously going to have masks and stuff on, and we're going to socially distance ourselves as much as you can. What that may look like is we might not be on the sidelines to shoot football this year. We might have to shoot it from the stands. But for us, if that does happen, the biggest thing for me is like, people aren't going to be able to go to the games, right? So they're going to rely on us to show them what happened, which I think makes our job that much more important, because parents who have seniors on the team, like, this is their last football season. We're going to be the only ones that are going to be able to bring them to see it. I mean, I'm sure that those circumstances with seniors, like, they have huddle and stuff like that, so they'll be able to show their parents stuff. But like, the excitement of Friday nights and our show, the highlight zone and stuff, is going to be that much more important, because people who can't go to the games, they're going to look to us to show them what happened.
Do you think it would be realistic that these kids will be going to school online and then playing sports? Or do you think if there's no in-person school, there's no sports?
I think it's hard to have a kid not be in school and to have sports, because if it's not safe enough for them to be in the building, how is it safe enough for them to play sports? Right. Like, the same thing comes back. Like, I'm hopeful. I want sports to happen so bad, and I really want it to happen. But, obviously the health and safety of these kids is the most important thing. You could agree with this, I'm sure. Like, when you were playing baseball, I know when I was playing sports, like, I don't want to say they're going to lie on the screeners, but if a kid saw somebody that had COVID and they don't have any symptoms, I mean, there are a lot of kids, I think, that would just be like, no, I'm good. Like, I feel fine. Like, I haven't been around it or anything like that, just because they want to play. And with that being said, I think it's going to be hard to have sports, because there's a lot of good kids out there, but there are a lot of kids that just all they care about is getting on the field. And that's where that issue lies. I know a few teams in our viewing area have already had to shut down voluntary workouts because they've had a kid on the team test positive. So it's just hard to see at this point. I know, for instance, like Grand Blanc, they're doing, I believe in high school, they're doing 2 weeks in school and the other days virtually. So there are some schools that are kind of doing that hybrid approach, but there are also a lot of schools that have already said, at least for September for now, they're going to be solely online.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. There's a lot of people who are pure like athletes who it's, if I can walk, if I'm going to go out there. And, I do think they're going to have problems with people saying, I have it, but, I'm not that bad, so I can go in, coach. And it's going to be hard to find the truth in it.
Right. And I mean, Ohio, I think I read somewhere that Ohio is doing every athlete and every coach has to get COVID tested 72 hours before games. But like, where do the school districts have the money to do that? Like, that's where the difficulty comes, is like, how feasible is that? And technically, if they get tested 72 hours before, they could come in contact with somebody between that window of 72 hours and game time. So there's just so many unknowns, and it's hard to see how it could happen at this point. Like golf, obviously, you've seen on the PGA Tour, maybe there was, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think it's like 6 maybe people since they've started. Now they're like kind of in a bubble, but it's a socially distant sport. Like, you don't have to come anywhere near somebody playing golf. Like, you could stand on one end of the green while they're on the other end of the green. Like, high school golf, like, I think that could happen. Cross country, obviously, other than just starting tighter, but they could find a way to spread them out for the start. Like, nobody's on top of each other. Tennis, you're on opposite sides of the court. Like, there are definitely sports that I think can happen. It's just, obviously, everybody's fixated on football.
Well,
that's the big one.
Yeah, it's the biggest sport, unfortunately. Of course, other sports matter and other sports have big impact, but that's especially the problem we're having with college sports, is that football brings in a lot of money for these universities. So whether it's safe or whether it's feasible or whatever they're going to try to do, I mean, they're doing conference only now. I could see them even going, we're just going to have 5 games this year just to salvage all the money they could get out of college football.
I mean, that's the big thing too. And where I feel bad the most for is if college football doesn't happen, how many nonprofit sports are going to hurt from it. You look at springtime baseball, lacrosse, cross country and stuff like that. A lot of those are non-profiting sports for these schools, or non-revenue sports, what they call them. But like, if football doesn't happen, how many of those are going to go down the drain because they just can't afford them anymore? You look at CMU, using that as an example. They had to cut men's track and field already, right? Now they're below their threshold of the NCAA to be D1 in men's sports. The NCAA granted them a 2-year waiver. But if football doesn't happen, they're going to have to, like, I don't see how they don't have to cut more sports if they're in such a deficit. And then with Big Ten going conference only, I think it was 2.15 million that they lost in guarantee games between Northwestern and Nebraska. So you look at that, okay, we're already in a deficit. Now we lost another 2.15 million. We had to cut a sport already. How does that look for the future? It's hard to see how without football season that happens. I was talking to some people using the Big Ten as an example. If they try to make the season happen, it's conference only. Hey, make Michigan, Ohio State week 1. That's their biggest grossing game of the year. I could see them doing things like that to get the most that they can, guarantee the big games early so they can make that revenue. But the hard thing too with football, with college, is that the NCAA obviously is the governing body, but they don't own those championships. So the NCAA, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't have a horse in the race in that respect. Obviously, they want to see football happen. They make money off the regular season, but the playoffs, they don't. I feel like they're not going to be the ones that make that call. They're going to leave it to the conferences. You look at, when teams start going conference only, look at their statement. You know what I mean? It was very like, okay, whatever. Like, you guys make your decision and we're going to back you, so it's hard to see, what's going to happen with that and what it's going to take for football season to get canceled.
Who have been some of your favorite athletes to watch all time?
All time? Well, I can say my favorite football player all time is definitely Ray Lewis. I'm a Baltimore Ravens fan. He's my man. Baseball wise, being grown up as a Yankee fan, I would say, like, most people would say Derek Jeter. I love Mariano Rivera. I know he didn't play every day, but like, I loved Mo. And then after like Jeter and stuff retired, Mark Teixeira was a big one of my favorites. He's a monster. Hockey, my favorite player, I grew up a Rangers fan, was Theo Fleury. I just loved him because he would just beat the piss out of everybody, and like, he just made hockey fun. And then basketball, probably. I think when I was younger, it might have been Jason Kidd.
Yeah.
But it was like, I had like a phase of Jason Kidd of where I was a huge fan of him. I wouldn't say he's my favorite all time. I don't know if I have necessarily one per se basketball, but Kidd, I loved him when he was on the Mavs. And then when he came to the Nets, he did big things there. And me and my family had season tickets to the Nets. So when he got there is when all the excitement came. That's when we had season tickets. So I guess I'd have to probably say J. Kidd.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm a little younger than you, so you have to forgive me about this. But those early 2000 Nets teams, man, with Richard Jefferson and Jason Kidd, probably were exciting to watch.
Oh my God! And then you had Kenyon Martin and Kerry Kittles in there, man. And then it was Jason Collins at the 5. I remember. So we had the year that we got tickets was the first year they went to the finals, and I just remember after that second year they went to the finals, and I was so pissed as a fan when that year they told everybody they were moving to Brooklyn. And they didn't move to Brooklyn for like 6 years. So I can tell you those next few years, nobody was in the stadium. Nobody was in the arena. And then they dealt away Kmart and Kittles. And you're just like, what are you doing? We just had 2 huge seasons, and now you're dealing like the core of this team. Like, yeah, they had Kidd and Jefferson and Collins still, but like Kmart and Kittles, man, that was like the heart and soul of that freaking team. And then they were all just gone. And then after that, everything went downhill.
So I know you're just as excited as me. We got hockey all day today, and we're having a bunch of hockey. Who do you like as a Stanley Cup favorite right now? Who are a couple teams who you go, they could win it all?
I think the hardest thing is I think it's so hard to tell because of the fact that, like, look, you look at the teams that were good before, the whole pause and everything like that, but now everyone is healthy now. There's no more injuries, right? Everybody's come back. You look at the other day with Chicago spanked Edmonton. And like, if that happened at the beginning of this whole thing before the pause, that realistically, that probably wouldn't have happened. A 12 seed beating a 5 like that. So I don't know if there's a specific team like from watching so far that you could be like, yeah, this team's going to win it. I think it's just exciting. And that's the fun part about it, is that anything could happen. It's kind of like going into March Madness where you're like, okay, there's this many teams, like anything can happen. It really feels like that in the NHL when you have the series and you have everybody kind of lay off, everybody's healthy. It's kind of like a new season starting all over again. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Is there a team you're pulling for?
I mean, obviously being a Rangers fan, I'm pulling for them, but they lost, they lost the other day, and I think they're down right now. So that doesn't bode too well for my boys, but I'd push for them of anything being a fan.
Not hoping for the Islanders, I'm assuming.
No, I don't like the Islanders very much. I'll say this, what's kind of cool is they're not even in it, but like the Devils, they would probably be the second person I push for, which is weird coming from a Rangers fan because growing up, a bunch of the players lived in my hometown, and their practice arena was the town next to mine. And I remember as a kid, my mom would take me ice skating every Sunday morning for like their free skate or whatever they had. And it always happened right after Devils practice. So we'd get there an hour early and watch the Devils practice every morning, which was super cool. Why I didn't become a Devils fan, because that's kind of weird. But they kind of have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart, except for obviously when they play my boys.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure. What does the future look like for you short term now? What are some stories you're reporting on, or what are some sports you're going to get into?
Well, I would say, the short term is obviously, getting through this whole COVID thing. That's the biggest thing. We just don't know what's going to happen. And it's kind of hard to be like, these are the biggest things that are coming up, or these are the things that I'm kind of targeting. Cause like, I'm sure as you've seen every week when it comes to what's going on right now feels like a month. So it's just been a wild, wild time. I would say of things that I'll probably be working on soon. There's a boxer from Linden, Joey Spencer. He's an up-and-comer. He's supposed to be fighting sometime this month, maybe next month. I'm not going to say exactly when because they haven't announced the fight date yet. But doing something with him is definitely going to be something that's coming up here soon. And, I mean, just during these times, I mean, it's just digging to find unique, different stories. If you asked me a week ago, obviously the Ally Challenge would have been a big one, finding some stuff there. Also, I'm working on some stuff right now with the Crim Festival of Races. It's a huge race in Flint every year. They're going virtual this year, but they're still doing a lot of cool and good things for the community to be involved and still be able to benefit the community, even though they won't be going down the bricks this year in downtown Flint.
Where can people follow you on social media and view all your content, TV and online?
Well, online on our website, abc12.com. Just click on the sports tab and you can see that stuff. My Twitter is probably where I'm the most active. That's at JasonLewis_TV. I need to be better on my Facebook for sure, and that's also Jason Lewis TV. But the best place to connect with me for sure, and like I'll always message back. I'll always respond to anybody that asks me and stuff on Twitter. That's definitely the place to go. And fun thing we did during the COVID times, we started a thing called our Trick Shot Challenge, and we used to do a trick shot every single night on ABC 12 that viewers would send into us. We've now shifted it to a weekly thing now that sports are back. We still want to keep it involved because we had some awesome submissions. It's fun getting the people involved. So every Monday night at 11, we're doing that. So if you're just hanging outside, it's a beautiful day outside today, go send us your trick shot and have a chance to be on our shows.
What's the best trick shot you've seen so far?
The best one I've seen. I mean, there's been some crazy ones. There was one dude who had a cup swinging from the rafters in his basement, and he chip shotted one in with a golf club with a ping pong ball.
Wow.
Another one hit 2 ping pong balls with a golf club too onto a treadmill. Both balls like slid down the treadmill and each one landed in a different cup. Like those were some crazy. Another one had one of those, those like chicken flinger things that you could put on your fingers. He flinged that, it hit dominoes. It like spun around and knocked a ball, and the ping pong ball like bounced off the floor, and he had like one of those plastic dart boards, and he put the dart on the back of a cup. So he shot the chicken flinger through the cup, it hit the bullseye, and then the ball bounced off the ground and landed in the cup. Like people come up with some awesome creative things. And that's why like we're not doing it every night anymore because we have stuff going on. But that's why I was like, as soon as we started getting these submissions, I'm like, we're doing this at least once a week, and we'll make it a weekly thing to keep it involved. Plus, it's fun to see like the stuff that people are sending in,
I mean, do you ever wonder how many times it took him to make the shot?
Oh, always. Always. And it's funny because a lot of times at the end of the videos, they're like, oh, first try. It ain't your first. There's no way you hit that on your first try. Or like, if you did, dude, that's crazy. That's awesome. But there's so many people that'll say that afterwards. I don't want to call him out, but I'm totally going to do it. Brandon Green, who works with us, he did a story on these kids that do trick shots. And I have the video, and I'm saving it for the right time to put it out there. But he hit a trick shot. He did like this over his back and landed in the hoop. And he goes, first try, what? And then I went back to the raw, and I clipped it. And there was like that his first try was actually like his 11th. So I have it with editing this, and I have a little counter popping up on it. So I'm waiting for the right time to debut it and let it out. So stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you got to do that with as many as you can. Unfortunately, you know, you're kind of outing them with how many times, but I'd say as many times.
I have no clue. Nobody tells me how many times. Although there was one person that sent their bloopers, and that was awesome. So I did their trick shot that night, and then because they sent me the bloopers, I also put the bloopers in there. And they were like, it wasn't like anything like crazy, but like, you're gonna send me the bloopers. That makes it so much more fun. So I'm totally gonna use that. So if you have bloopers too, send those to me, and we'll have some fun with those also.
Thank you very much for the interview, Jason. Always a pleasure talking to you.
You too, of course, anytime.
And to check out this interview and multiple interviews of mine, go to my YouTube channel, James Paxton. And as always, thank you to the guest, Mr. Jason Lewis.
Of course, thank you again. And hopefully we'll see you in person at a sporting event sometime soon.
Yeah, it'd be nice to cover things in person, but at the moment we got to do it virtually.
Exactly. Luckily, I got my taste last week, so I'm going to save for that and enjoy that for as long as possible. And hopefully now, in 4 or 5 weeks, we'll get some high school football going.
Yeah, man. All I'm hoping for is that I can be back with that Saginaw Spirit team, because last year was my first year being the radio host for the Saginaw Spirit for away games, and man, we missed out on a playoff run with both Flint and Saginaw.
Both teams would have been good for sure. I think they definitely would have made a run. It was going to be exciting to see with the Spirit too, just because you look at what they did last year, or the year before, I should say, and I don't want to say that they should have won that series, but I think they should have won that series. It's hard when you go up early, but then when you lose your goalie because he baseball bats a hockey puck into the stands, like, it's hard to come back from something like that. But that was an awesome video. But
5 games though?
What?
5 games suspension? I mean, that's a little far, right?
It's far, but hey, you know what? It said in the rule book. It was that, like, the crazy thing is, like, that case of batting a puck into the stands was legitimately in their rule book. Like, they had planned that as if they knew it was going to happen eventually. So, I mean, if it says it in there, and it's always said it in there, you know, you have to go into it thinking of it. But that was definitely a tough series for them to lose after being up early. But yeah, like you said, you know, with all the talent they had this year, obviously Cole Perfetti being a big part of that, Bodie Wild, you know, like, they had some beast dudes, that Cole Koski, Blake Jenkins, like, that team is talented, and it stinks that they don't get to see this year. But, you know, the bright side is you'll get to see Cole Perfetti probably go top 5, top 6 in this year's draft. So it'll be interesting to see who ends up with him. Maybe even the Red Wings at 4. He's definitely boosted his spot. Like, take the semi-local kid.
I mean, how we're going to end this interview, Jason, is the Red Wings are picking Cole Perfetti. Like,
I like it. That's our hot takes of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Jason.
Yeah, no problem.